Okay, hello everybody, welcome to the AURES Auction Academy. We are today giving the fifth presentation of a row of seminars which the research consortium, which is doing the research project AURES, decided to do in order to spread the knowledge which we developed throughout this project. Now, what we are going to do today is we are talking about how to participate in an auction for REX support. My name is Silvana Tiedemann. I am from ECOFIS, and together with me, Marie-Christine Haufe from Tacon GmbH will present this seminar. She will take over after on half of the time. What are we going to do today? I will give a short introduction and what actually changes with regard to the competitiveness of a project, and touch briefly upon types of participation, so what kind of actors are we actually talking about. Secondly, I will talk about the timing of participation, so when does it actually make sense to participate in an auction and to what time of the project planning. And thirdly, we will talk about strategy. So what kind of strategy should a project developer or an investor actually pursue in order to get the most out of his or her participation. This is the part that Marie will take up. So let's start. Wait, 1 second before I start, some housekeeping, which I forgot to do in the very beginning. This presentation is recorded, so please keep that in mind if you ask questions, which should not discourage you, obviously, from doing so. We will then repeat them, but they will be part of the presentation. And secondly, if you ask questions, which you're more than welcome to do, please note them in the Q&A. And my colleague, Michael Minter, will make sure that they will be reflected in the procedure. So let's start. What actually changes with regard to the competitiveness of a project? It is still true that obviously a project needs to have good figures, good costs in order to be competitive with the overall market. But what we can see is that the overall market will become more important. So what you can see here on the left is a non-competitive project. Basically, what you see is that it has here €99 per megawatt hour as a bid price, and this is significantly higher than the market average, which you can see on the left. Why is that so? Well, due to several factors, but what you can see is that the return on equity, which is required by the project's investors, is too high to actually make this project competitive. How could this change? Well, first of all, the project developer could, for example, try to find an even better location. Location is a significant factor in the project planning, and this might actually make the project competitive by keeping the same return on equity. A second example would be to basically reduce the expectations on the return on equity. Now, this is not always possible because it depends on different market factors, but the main message is here that projects will be competitive if they have a significant advantage in factors that have a significant impact on the business. All of this, what I just told, you can also find on below of the pictures. You will see that in quite a lot of the slides. This is basically for those which are seeing the presentation afterwards. Now, how do we determine the competitiveness of a project? Normally, in the feed-in system, we knew that the project developer only had to know their own costs and their own figures. Now they also have to know about the market development. What we have seen, for example, in the German pilot auction for Grindhouse TV, is that prices significantly went down during the first round. And what we noticed in some talks with project developers and other stakeholders within the business is that this led to quite some uncertainty over how prices will develop, and some fear that they will just go down. What we can see, however, if we have a look at the longer term, here, for example, the Brazilian wind auction since 2009, is that prices also go up once the market figures actually change. What we can see here that from 2012 onwards, where several factors changed, for example, underlying financial market conditions, but also some change in the auction design, that figures actually do go up again. And as a third message, which is quite important, is that even though in the beginning nobody really knows what the price of an auction, of the auction will be, what the result of it is, after some learning, market actors will get the knowledge and will get the experience to actually forecast also auction results. Here on the right, you see an example from my Dutch colleagues, which made a prediction for the FTE Plus system, which works slightly different. Therefore, you see budget here and not price. But basically, what you can see is that the red bars, which are the actual results, are neatly in between of the predicted results. So main message here, market information becomes more important, but it is not only going down, and market results may be predicted after some learning takes place in the industry. Third slide in this section, the question, who should actually participate in an auction? Should I do that myself because I'm developing the project, or should I search for collaboration? Now, this is not a subject we can go into detail here. As an outlook, we will touch upon this issue way more in the 7th seminar of the series, which is on ensuring actor diversity, avoiding market power both by design and also new business models and collaboration. Here, for the rest of the presentation, we assume that we are talking about professional project developers which have a portfolio, albeit it might not be the largest. Talking about timing. So at what time should I actually participate in the auction? What we know for sure is that we have some formal requirements which we have to fulfill in order to participate in an auction. So these are the qualification requirements which are the subject of the next webinar, the 6th one. But there's also a significant amount of flexibility on the part of the project developer. For example, risk processes and the market competition. And I will go into detail with now. To do so, let's have a look at the normal project development cycle of a renewable energy project. What you can see here on the left is that you have some major stages of project planning, which are first the preliminary planning, then the project planning, where you really go into the detailed technical planning, economics of your project. Then you have to go into a permitting procedure, you have the construction and the operations. And what's quite typically for renewable energy projects is that costs really occur during construction. So basically, before, obviously, project planning is important and it's costly, but particularly in the beginning, if you have a look at the whole cost structure of a project, this is not where the cost lies. And on the other hand, what you can see here with risk is that a lot of the projects actually fail in the first stages of the project planning. And they're actually, you will have to avoid them. Now, what happens if auctions come in? Let's assume you have quite low formal requirements. So at the quite early stages of the whole process, you may actually participate. You decide to do so, and the auction then also sets a maximum realization period. So basically, it gives you a realization deadline. And you as a project developer will have to decide by your own, and you as a bank will have, once you're actually evaluating a project, you will have to decide, did this project developer actually take this into consideration? But there's also a project deadline which comes with the auction. So, and what you really would like to avoid is that you have a good project which can be realized in time, which is competitive, but which fails because you cannot meet the realization deadline. So 2 questions which you have to ask yourself. First of all, when do I know well enough, you will know it, never know for sure, but well enough that my project is feasible, so that I can actually realize this particular project? And, well, what happens if I don't? This is then a design question. You might pay the penalty, you might actually be excluded as a developer, but you have to ask yourself the question, what happens if I don't realize this particular project? And secondly, how long do I actually need to participate? How long do I need to realize this project? And what happens if I'm late? And if you ask yourself these questions, you might come to the conclusion that actually, despite the formal requirements already allow you to participate in the auction, it might make sense to delay the participation a little bit so that you then don't come into trouble with the realization deadline. Secondly, talking about processes, we cannot go into all of the details. They are also quite specific, but in general, we think that the development of REST project will not be significantly affected. However, there are some points which I would like to highlight, particularly the financial market. At the moment, a developer goes to a bank, presents a bankable project, the bank makes an evaluation, and then normally several banks will make an offer on the financing conditions. The developer chooses the best offer, and then the developer, has quite a successful project. Now, this basically stays the same in an auction. However, there's a circular process which I would like to highlight. What does it actually mean to have a bankable project? Well, basically, it means that it has a price tag. So the bank wants to know how much does the project actually cost per kilowatt hour. And in order to do so, however, the project developer has to participate in an auction. And in order to participate in the auction, well, the developer somehow has to know what is the best of which I could pick from. Now, this means what you can see here is a circular process where it is not 100% clear at what time it actually makes sense to involve the bank, to pick a bank. This then depends a lot on the market environment. So basically, are the banks eager to finance because the rest of the financial market does not really give very good conditions, or do we have to, is the developer more in a weaker position? Some of the same process might actually also be observed in procurement, but we can discuss that later in the Q&A session. Main message here, not everything will change, but there needs to be some readjustment of the relationships between stakeholders. Third point, which is important for timing, is the expected competition. What I said earlier is that information becomes more important, and this is true here as well. So let's assume we have 6 rounds, we have the same volume which is on offer, and then we have, and what we know, however, is that the available capacity on the market differs from round to round. So, for example, here in round 3 and 4, you see not quite a lot of projects on the market, whereas in year 5, you actually see that there's quite a huge competition. So what you might do, what you might want to do as a project is to delay participation from round 2 to round 3, though this might cause some delay in your process. Or on the other hand, you might actually try to get into the round earlier, even though you might face some higher risk with your project, because let's say your permitting procedure is not 100% finished yet, and then this gives you the flexibility to then secure a higher price. So taking all that together, we can see that information in the market becomes way more valuable in the future. The auction design sets the earliest possible date for participation. A good timing, so if you really think through your processes, reduces the risk and allows you to benefit from lower competition in some of the rounds. And some business models and operations might change from and will need to have adaptation to basically secure that you still have some lower costs. So far about the timing, I will now hand over the presentation to my colleague, Marie, and she will give you an insight on the bidding strategy and what issues you will have to take into consideration there. Thank you very much for this first part, and Marie, the floor is yours.
welcome to the second part of the presentation, and thank you, Silvana, for the great start of the webinar. So after you had so far a comprehensive look on when and if to participate at all in an auction for renewable energy support, we will now do the next step and answer the question how to determine an optimal bidding strategy. At this time, the project developer already decided to plan, to develop and to finalize the project. So at the time of bidding, project developers probably already have invested a lot of time and money for pre-qualification. However, rational bidders will not consider all these pre-investments in the optimal bidding strategy. So in theory, we call these pre-investments sunk costs. So they are already done and cannot made undone after spend all this time and money. So for the bidding strategy, we will focus on future costs and what the project developer is expecting for the future. So let's start with the question, what is relevant for bidding? Basically, we assume that bidders aim to maximize the expected profit through their submitted bids. For that, a deep market analysis will be helpful, and bidders will benefit from answering the following questions as precisely as possible. So in a first step, each project developer should ask internal questions. So, for example, what is my valuation of the auction good? Or in our case, what are the expected costs for the auction project? Then, do I know these costs exactly, or is it rather an estimation with high uncertainty? Then, project developers should also have a look on their risk attitude. So in theory, we distinguish between risk-averse, risk-neutral, and risky bidders. How this risk attitude will affect the bidding strategy we will see later on in the upcoming examples. In step 2, a project developer should also consider external factors. For example, the level of competition. So for that, it's, for example, important to know how high the auction volume actually is, but also how many participants will bid in the auction. So this sometimes can be quite clear, and normally in real-world applications, you only have limited information about the level of competition. For example, because you don't know how many participants you actually have in the auction. Then it is also important to have certain information about the competitors. So, for example, it would be very great to know how the competitors answered the internal questions. So, what is their valuation or cost for the auction project, and how do they evaluate certain risks? However, in real world, this is mostly only very limited. However, after gathering all these information, the circle questions start. And this is that the project developer should also ask, what do my competitors believe about me? So how do they think about my internal factors? And then, and this is the next step in the circle, is the question, what do my competitors believe I believe about them? And so on and so forth. So the next question would be, what do the competitors believe I believe they believe about me? And so on. So this is a basic game theoretical approach auction theory is based on and we are working with. So in theory, this can be quite easily modeled with mathematical methods, but in the real world, this might be difficult to answer all these questions until a certain degree of information. So today we will discuss two auction formats as examples. So we have first the pay-as-bid auction and then the uniform price auction. I think some of you have already heard about these auction formats. Nevertheless, I will give a brief explanation of those. But first, I would like to mention the assumptions or the benchmark case we are looking at today. So first, we have a one-time auction, so there's no repetition of the auction in the first benchmark case. And we have multiple units that will be sold through the auction. Thereby, the number of auctioned units and even the number of participating bidders is public. So all bidders know how many projects will be awarded in the end and how many competitors they have to face in the auction. Further, we assume that we have risk-neutral bidders that are only interested in one single project. And all bidders have no uncertainties regarding the individual costs. So all have concrete information about future costs and about the total costs of the project. But, and this is the crucial point, bidders do not know their competitors' costs. So they have uncertainties regarding the competitors' strength. But we think, we assume that bidders have symmetric belief. That is, all bidders, for example, know that the competitors have also costs between 100 and 200. But we don't know the exact cost. And last but not least, we assume that all bidders behave rationally. So then we come to the auction formats in detail. So in both auctions, bidders submit sealed bids. And this happens simultaneously and unaware of their competitors' bids. Bidders have a certain deadline which they have to meet, and yes, bids are collected until this deadline is reached. And then the lowest bids are awarded until supply equals demand. So this is the same for both auction formats. For the pay-as-bid auction, each winning bidder determines his award price through his corresponding individual bid in case of winning. So this is just quite easy to understand. In a pay-as-bid auction, you get what you bid. In the uniform price auction, this is different because then in case of winning, all winning bidders receive a common award price. So this is just one price for all successful bidders. And this can be determined either through the lowest rejected bid. So I, as a successful bidder, would never have any impact on this award price, or it can be determined through the highest accepted bid. In this case, I have at least a small probability to be price determining with the bid, but it's not the same situation as in the pay-as-bid auction, where I definitely define my award price in case of winning. So let's start with the pay-as-bid example. So for the beginning, I would like to present general principles for optimal bidding with regard to the benchmark case. So to make it a more illustrative example, we will have some numbers here. So we assume that bidder I has costs of 150 for the project. And so in case he's successful in the auction, his bid, which we have to determine now, is exactly his award price. And then the profit would be just the difference between what he's getting, his award price, and the cost. Otherwise, so if he's not successful in the auction, his profit is 0. So the goal of the bidder is to submit a cost-based bid. This is the only information he has so far. So this is 150 that maximizes his expected profit. So I think the first result, which is quite obvious, is that a bidder in a pay-as-bid auction has to exaggerate his costs in the bid. So only if his bid is greater than his costs, he has a chance to generate a positive profit in case of winning. So it's definitely clear that bidder I should bid something above 150. But what exactly should he bid? Should he bid 160 and then make a profit of 10 in case of winning? Or rather 180 and then make a profit of 30 in case of winning? So as you can maybe already imagine, this is a kind of trade-off that has to be solved, because the higher the bid, so 180 for example, the higher the profit in case of winning. But the other side is that the higher the bid, the lower the chance of being successful. So the bid of 180 has a lower probability to be awarded than the bid of 160. So to balance the trade-off for cost exaggeration, we have to take into account several external factors, for example. So this is the most important one, I would say, is the level of competition. So in the benchmark case, we assumed a constant level of competition, so it was just one round, but bidders were informed about the level of competition, since they were informed about the number of participants and the number of auction goods. However, if we relax these simplifying assumptions and think about beliefs, that the bidder believes that the number of participants is higher, or he is facing stronger competitors in the auction, then this will lead to a lower cost exaggeration than in the other case. So maybe it's easier to have a look on the cases we see in this slide here. So in the first case, bidder I, which has cost of 150, this is still the same, faces competitors which have costs between 100 and 200, where these costs are uniformly distributed. And in the second case, bidder I faces competitors which have costs between 140 and 240. Then you see that the relative strength of bidder I is different in those two cases. So in the first case, he's a rather average bidder, but in the second case, he belongs to the rather strong bidders. And depending on this different situation for bidder I, he will bid differently. So in the first case, he faces relatively stronger bidders. So he will tend to do less cost exaggeration, because he has to take into account that a bid which would be too high reduces dramatically his winning probability. Whereas in the second case, where he is already quite strong, bidder I could try to submit a relatively higher bid, because this is not that disadvantageous for his winning probability, but in case he is successful with this bid, he would realize a greater or a bigger profit than submitting less cost exaggeration. So note that external effects is reducing the chance of winning, which can either be an increasing number of participants or facing stronger competitors, for example, will always lead to less cost exaggeration, or as you can say, more aggressive bidding behavior. The next factor is the risk attitude. So although this is important for the trade-off for cost exaggeration, and it's more related to the internal questions. So in the benchmark case, we had risk-neutral bidders, but for now we are relaxing this assumption in that kind that we think of a risk-averse bidder now. And risk aversion, that is a bidder who doesn't like to gamble that much. So in other words, risk aversion will also lead to less cost exaggeration. And the motivation behind that is that risk-averse bidders tend to not forgive a chance of winning just for a higher profit. So they are more focused on the chance of winning as on gaining a higher profit by submitting a higher bid. In practice, and this is quite interesting, it is often observed that bidders behave rather risk-averse than risk-neutral. However, it's quite difficult to quantify risk attitudes in real-world applications. So it's important to know this aspect, but I think it's not that crucial for real-world applications. So then we come to the other auction format, which is the uniform price auction, here with the variant of the lowest rejected bid. And here we also have some general principles for optimal bidding in the benchmark case. So we also assume the bidder I has cost of 150, and in case he is winning in the auction, his award price is determined by the lowest rejected bid. So the only thing we know so far from a bidder's perspective is that if the bidder is awarded, the award price is higher than his bid. But we do not know the award price exactly at the time of bid submission. His profit, again, is then the difference between award price and costs, and in case he's not winning, his profit is just 0. So also this bidder has the goal to submit a cost-based bid that maximizes his expected profit. And in this case, so the uniform price auction with lowest rejected bid, we have a weakly dominant bidding strategy, which is to bid truthfully one's cost. So as bidder I has cost of 150, his bid would be equal to that, so he would just bid 150, which are the costs. So this sounds quite easy, so he has not think about any kind of cost exaggeration. And yes, so this is, but yeah, let's see why this is a weakly dominant strategy and why it's not better to bid below the cost in order to increase winning probability, or submit a bit higher than the cost in order to generate a higher profit. So you see on the table here the 3 different bidding strategies. So in the middle, the green one, we have the weakly dominant strategy, which is to bid 150, and then we have the bidding strategy to bid below 140 and to bid above with 160. So now we compare all these 3 bidding strategies for all possible cases of the award price. So first, if the award price is lower or equal to 140, none of these strategies will lead to an award. So all profits will be 0. In the case that the award price is between 140 and 150, the first bidding strategy, so the bid of 140 will be awarded, or the others won't. But in this case, bidder I would realize a negative profit because the award price is lower or equal to 150 and his costs are exactly 150, so his rent is equal or lower to 0, which shouldn't be the goal. For the next case, when the award price is between 150 and 160, a bid of 140 and a bid of 150 would be awarded, and both will earn a profit greater than 0. For an award price greater than 160, all 3 strategies will be awarded, but yes, all will be awarded and have a positive profit. So, but what you can see now is that the green strategy, so the to bid truthfully 150, is in none of these 4 cases worse than one of the others. So it's always better or at least equal to an alternative strategy. And this is why we call this strategy a weakly dominant strategy. So it's always the best choice for bidder I to just submit a bid equal to the cost in the benchmark case. So this is important here, that only in very limited cases, so only in this special benchmark case I presented in the beginning, this truthful bidding is a weakly dominant strategy. So there are a lot of external factors that can change this and lead to another optimal bidding strategy apart from that. So what would affect the weekly dominant strategy of truthful bidding? So how stable is this weekly dominant strategy with regard to other factors? So, which is quite interesting here is that neither the level of competition nor the risk attitude impacts the weekly dominant strategy. So this was definitely the case in the paid bid auction, but here for the weekly dominant strategy in the uniform price auction, this is not relevant. And the motivation behind that is that truthful bidding is just the best practice independent of what the other participants do. So then I don't need information or beliefs about the competitors because they are just irrelevant for the bid calculation. However, this is what I already mentioned, the existence of a weekly dominant strategy only holds in very limited situations. And so it rather serves as a theoretical benchmark. So for example, if I have a repeated auction or if I have bidders in the auction that are interested in several projects, this weekly dominant strategy isn't valid anymore. Now, I think we can skip this example, which is focused on uncertainties for the individual valuation, because this will lead to a misestimation of costs, which again will lead to under or overbidding, and I think I will say a few words later on to that. So we now come to the irrational bidding behavior. Because so far we just talked about rational bidding behavior. So we learned something about general principles in these two auction formats, but this is only what a rational bidder would do. So a rational bidder, as we already assumed, maximizes his expected profit by submitting an optimal bid according to his available information at the time of bid submission. So a rational bidder behaves optimal regarding the available information he has at the time of the auction. So this is a quite theoretical assumption, and irrational bidding behavior may occur in real-world applications because bidders often only have limited experience with auctions, or they misunderstand the auction format because it's just new. And further, they may have an incomplete or incorrect incorporation of available information into the bid. That is, they do not know how to incorporate the information they have correctly into the bid. And finally, they might have to anticipate uncertainties in the bid, but they are not able to do that sufficiently. So what forms of irrational bidding behavior do we have? In general, irrational bidding behavior means that the bidder deviates from the optimal bidding strategy, which we have discussed before. So there are two forms of irrational bidding behavior. First, we have underbidding. That means that a bidder submits consciously or unconsciously a bid lower than his optimal bid. The motivation or the intuition behind that could be that the bidder tries to increase his win probability. For example, if he has a high willingness to enter the market. But, however, this underbidding includes a certain kind of risk, namely the risk of a negative profit in case of winning. Overbidding, this is quite similar. So overbidding is if a bidder submits a bit higher than his optimal bid. And the motivation for that could, for example, be that the bidder aims to increase his rent in case of winning. I think if we remember the paid bid auction, where this cost separation was quite obvious, I think then this motivation can easily be understood. But all of this includes risks, namely the risk of missing an award opportunity. So if I gamble too much and bid too high, of course, if I'm awarded then, I will have a high award price, but it could also be the case that I miss the award because the bid was just too high. So we have consequences of irrational bidding behavior as well for the bidders, but also for the auctioneer. So bidders have negative consequences of underbidding in form of a negative profit, which will finally lead or force them to cancel the project. And for overbidding, we have this missing winning opportunity and maybe also the sunk costs. So if we had high pre-qualifications before the auction and then the bid was too high and consequently not awarded, bidders will have to pay the sunk cost. From an auctioneer's perspective, we have for underbidding the risk of low realization rates and also the risk of discouraging bidders. For the overbidding behavior, we have high support costs. So if bidders tend to overbid regularly in the auctioneer has to expect really high costs. So for both auctioneer and bidder, there exist incentives to mitigate irrational bidding behavior. Yes, for example, the auctioneer could provide relevant information and so on in order to offer the bidders a better understanding of costs and valuations, for example. So then the last slide, and this is a general conclusion for today's webinar. So by introducing auctions, not everything changes, but information on the market environment becomes more valuable. This fact we have already seen in Silvana's presentation, where it might be important for timing and the decision of participation in a general, and also for the bidding, it's quite important to have as much information about the market as possible. Then bidders should carefully evaluate the timing of their participation, because they could benefit from a later participation, but also benefit from an earlier participation. This is just depending on the market or on the expectations about the level of competition. Then stakeholders should start reflecting on the impact on operations early to identify possible needs for adaptation. And a good bidding strategy can help to maximize profits. Finally, irrational bidding may harm the bidder and have negative impact on the overall auction. So this is, briefly the main conclusions of the webinar today. And I think now it's time to say thank you for listening, and please feel free to ask questions.
In order to ask questions, you might type them on the right-hand side in the Q&A field, and we will then take them up. So we have one question here, which is it a bad idea to bid zero in a uniform pricing auction? You would not determine the price anyways, right? Marie, I guess this is a question which you might take up.
Yes. This is a valid question because this is the basic in motivation for underbidding. But however, it is not a good idea to bid zero in a uniform price auction because although you won't determine the award price in case of being awarded, the award price could be lower than your actual cost. So let's say you have costs of 8 or a cost covering support level would be 8 cents, for example, and you bid zero, then it could happen that the award price is 6 cents in the end. And so, of course, you would be awarded with a bid of zero, but you will only get 6 cents, although you would have needed 8 cents. So this is what a dominant bidding strategy, which is a main characteristic of a dominant bidding strategy, that independent of what the others do, this is the best choice for you. So underbidding is never a good idea for a bidding strategy. Yes.
Maybe just to add upon that, we can though observe underbidding in some of the auctions which take place, and what we hope is that participants will get to know how the auction format works, and that this is, as Marie just explained, not a dominant strategy. Now there's 2 more questions. So the first is if both formats, so both uniform pricing and pay as bid, are used in practice. To just answer this, yes, they are both used in practice. What we can see, for example, in the German pilot scheme for PV, is that even the pricing rule changed from one to another round. We had a first round with pay as bid, and then 2 more with uniform pricing. And then again, we will have pay as bid in the future. In the British system, in the UK, we have a uniform pricing mechanism. In Italy, we have pay as bid. So this is changes between the systems. And what we can also see that sometimes it becomes even more complex. So not the very basic cases which we just mentioned, but a more complex case. I hope this answers your question. So there's a third question. What changes with regards to timing and bidding strategy if I have a huge portfolio? So if I am a multi-project bidder, I would suggest I briefly touch upon the timing, and then Marie, you can say some words about the bidding strategy. So with regard to the timing, well, basically what changes is that I have to optimize my portfolio. So what could happen, for example, is that I decide to delay some projects, but others I will put them, I take them earlier, even though the competition is high, but I try to secure an award at this particular time, because what I have to keep in mind is that not only this particular project plays a role, but I have a whole project, I have staff, I have my operations which have to keep on going, and then I have to optimize over my whole portfolio. So the costs of not having a project change. Marie, would you mind saying some words about the bidding strategy?
Yes. So regarding the bidding strategy, it's quite complex to say something about multi-project bidders, but I try to give you a first impression of what can happen if we have multi-project bidders. So this strongly depends on what kind of auction is conducted. So if we have a uniform price auction, for example, we will have incentives for a multi-project bidder which are different for a single project bidder, because even if you cannot, in a uniform price auction, we said that a bidder cannot influence his expected or the award price through the corresponding bid. But if you submit multiple bids, so if you participate in the auction with multiple projects and you submit specific bids for each project, you have the chance to influence your bidding price of one of the projects with the bid of another, of the project. So you have these interdependencies between bids, and this will lead to so-called reduction of competition, because then bidders could just submit higher bids for additional projects in order to hope that these higher bids will, in the end, determine the award price for the first project. So this is advantages from a bidder's perspective, but definitely disadvantages for the auctioneer, because he then has to expect higher support costs. In the pay-as-bid auction, these incentives are not that strong. So this is why the reason for that is that in a pay-as-bid auction, I can only influence the award price of a project with the corresponding bid. So I don't have any interdependencies between bids of several projects. So multi-project bidders can be a risk for the auctioneer, but this strongly depends on which auction format is chosen. Yeah.
I guess that probably this explanation already answers one other question, which was raised, which is what are the advantages of pay-as-bid then? Marie, do you want to add something on that, or do you think that with so basically the format is more robust in case you have a lot of multi-project bidders?
Yes.
It's one of the main advantages. Are there others?
Yes, I mean, in the real-world applications, we have in the uniform price auction also the disadvantage of underbidding. So this is a characteristic which is often seen in cases where we have a lot of unexperienced bidders. So and this incentive to underbid we just don't have in a pay-as-bid auction. I think this is the pay-as-bid auction is quite intuitive in the sense, in an economic sense. So if I have a product, I just define a price, and this price already includes the minimum margin. So I think for unexperienced bidders, the pay-as-bid auction is an easier format than the uniform price. And this might be an advantage over the uniform price auction.
Okay, another question to you, Marie. Assuming reasonable, rational behavior among participants, certainty regarding the own business case, and almost similar business cases among companies participating, can one say anything about how much profit a winning participant would generate on top of project costs? For example, if there are 3 participants, 5 participants, 10 participants, and so on. So can you basically model that?
Yes, we can model that. But yes, it depends on the range of costs. So what is the lower bound and what is the upper bound of costs? And then, as I already said, how many bidders do participate and where in this range my costs settle. So this is the basic information we need, and then we can model that. But this will not, you cannot follow that, or in real-world applications, all bidders understand this and actually behave like that. So, but in theory, of course, this can be easily modeled. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There's one more question, which is, could you give another example of processes or operations that might need to change or that will have to adapt? So what the example which I've shown is related to the financial market, so to project financing. Another example which I could think of regards the procurement of for example, in the wind case turbines. This is what I've mentioned in the presentation where most of the costs actually occur. But what the processes as they work today is that normally you will first have to pay part of the money to the producer of the wind turbine, and then the producer of the wind turbine will actually tell you at what time, not at what price, but at what time the turbine will be delivered. Now, in order to actually put the money on the table, so in order to actually give the producer the money which they need in order to tell you when they are going to develop when they are going to send the turbine, you basically have to make sure that your project will be able to, that you will be able to realize your project. So basically you already have you already should have won in the auction. But in order to time the auction, you would kind of need to know the delivery date. So there again, we have a chicken and egg problem where I'm pretty sure that there will be solutions for this, but this is where the contracts between banks, developers, and producers might be affected by the auction procedure as such. Are there any more questions at this moment? If not, you see our contact details on the last slide. As we mentioned in the very beginning, at the very beginning, this seminar is recorded, so you will be able to watch the seminar again, or also to distribute it to your contacts. And in case you have any questions, please feel free to email either Marie or me. You will find our email addresses there. Thank you very much for your question and for your time, and we hope to see you again in the next in one of the next seminars, which you can find on the slide just shown, and as always on the website of AURES. Thank you very much for the participation, and have a nice day.
Yes, thank you also from my side, and a great week for all of you.